Good morning, everyone. My name is Mulyati Anggraini, and my partner is Diva Zulni Faradila. We would like to present about correlational design. Okay, some of the parts that we will discuss there are defines correlational design, and then when to use correlational design. Next, types of correlational design, key characteristic of correlational design, and then ethical issues in conducting correlational research, and the steps in conducting a correlational study, and the last, criteria for evaluating a correlational study. Okay, the first I want to discuss about Devine's correlational design. According to Creswell, correlational research designs are used by investigators to describe and measure the degree of relationship between two or more variables or sets of scores, and a procedure in which subject scores on two variables are simply measured without manipulation of any variables to determine whether there is a relationship. Correlational research examines the relationship between two or more non-manipulated variables. Okay, next, when to use correlational design. According to Kettner, Smith, and Pamel, 1997, we can use these designs when you try to connect two or more variables to see if they influence each other, such as the relationship between teachers who support appropriate development practice and the use of an entire language approach to teaching reading. And according Anderson and Case, 1997, this design allows you to predict outcomes such as prediction that abilities, school quality, students' motivation, and academic courses affect students' achievement. Two types of correlational design. The first, the explanatory design, and the prediction design. Okay, I want to discuss about the explanatory design. Some of researchers have opinions about the explanatory design. One of researchers is Cohen and Manion. 1994, various authors refer to explanatory correlational research as relational research because one basic objective of this form of correlational research is to explain the association between or among variables. We will use the term explanatory research in this discussion, and an explanatory research design is a correlational design in which the researcher is interested in the extent to which two variables or more variables, that is, where changes in one variable are reflected in changes in the other. Explanatory designs consist of a simple association between two variables. For example, sense of humor and performance in drama, or more than two variables. For example, pressure from friends or feelings of isolation that contribute to binge drinking. Okay, the characteristic of explanatory design. The first, the investigators correlate two or more variables. So they report the correlation statistical test and mention the use of multiple variables. Readers find these variables specifically mentioned in the purpose statement, the research questions, or the tables reporting the statistical procedures. And then the second, the researchers collect that data at one point in time. Evidence for this procedure will be found in the administration of instruments in one setting to students. In explanatory correlational research, the investigators are not interested in either past or future performance or participants. And then the third, the investigators analyzes all participants as a single group compared to an experiment that involves multiple groups or treatment conditions. The researcher collects score from only one group and does not divide the group into categories or factors. Unlike experimental research, all levels of information from the group are used, rather than divide scores on self-esteem in high and low categories of score, as would be done in experimental research. A correlational researcher uses all scores on a continuum, such as from 10 to 90. Next characteristic of explanatory design, the researcher obtains at least 2 scores for each individual in the group, 1 for each variable. In the method discussion, the correlational investigator will mention how many scores were collected from each participant. For example, for each individual in a study of optimism and appropriate health behaviors, the researcher would collect 2 score, an optimism score and a health behavior score. And then the researcher reports the use of the correlation statistical test or an extension of it in the data analysis. This is the basic feature of this type of research. In addition, the researcher includes reports about the strength and the direction of the correlational test to provide additional information. And finally, the researcher makes interpretation or draws conclusion from the statistical test result. It is important to note that the conclusion don't establish a probable cause and effect or causal inference relationship because the researcher can use only statistical control. So for example, control over variables using statistical procedures rather than the more rigorous control of cyclically altering the condition, such as in experiment. Okay, let's move on to the prediction design. Instead of simply relating variables to variables at a time or a complex set, such as in our last example in a prediction design, researchers seek to anticipate outcomes by using certain variables as predictors. For example, superintendents and principals need to identify teachers who will be successful in their schools, to select the teachers who have a good chance of success, the administrators can identify predictors of success using correlational research. So the purpose of a prediction research design is to identify variables that will predict an outcome or criterion. In this form of research, the investigator identifies one or more predictor variable and a criterion or outcome variable. The following characteristic of prediction design. The first, the authors typically include the word prediction in the title. It might also be in the purpose statement or research question. And second, the researcher typically measure the predictor variable or variables at one point in time and the criterion variable at the later point in time. Study to determine if the researcher built a time dimension into design. And the last, the authors forecast future performance. They usually state this intent in the purpose statement or in the research question, in the justification of the research problem. Writers also mention their intent to predict some outcomes.
And the next is key characteristics of correlational design. There are 3 points. First, displays of scores. Second, associations between scores. And the third, multiple variable analysis. First, display of scores is a study that displays scores on a graph or present in a table or correlation matrix. A correlation matrix is present a visual display of the correlations coefficient for all variables in a study. Second, associations between scores is to make a certain assessment of the meaning of the relationship score. For example, a positive correlation. The points move in the same direction. When x increases, so does y. And the third, multiple variable analysis, which means the study predicts results based on more than one variable. So the result of this variable can be recalculated the impact of each variable. And next, ethical issues in conducting correlational research. Ethical issues are problems that arise in many correlational research process. As in data collection, ethical consideration with adequate samples and controls are needed. Therefore, in the analysis of data research, need a complete statement for the use of appropriate statistics. Like research not only include making data, but there must also be statements about cause and effect relationships as well. And next, the steps in conducting a correlational study. First, determine if a correlational study best addresses the research problem. It can be test the problem with the experience itself, find out the answer according to the fact. Second, identify individuals to study, which means analysis of learning test results, basic ability tests, attitude disclosure skills, and study habits. And the third, identify 2 or more measures for each individual in the study. And the last, criteria for evaluating a correlational study. To evaluate the quality of a good correlational study, authors consider a satisfied sample size for hypothesis testing, the display of correlational results in a metric or graph, an interpretation about the direction and magnitude of the association between 2 or more variables.
So, correlational design are non-experimental designs that allow the researcher to invert relationships among two or more variables rather than to draw conclusions about cause and effect.